Everywhere Islam touches a non-Islamic civilization of any kind, there's violence. I mean, it's in Malaysia and Thailand, in India and Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in all across this strip, all across Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. You can keep going. You go Philippines. Like everywhere. Russia and Chechnya. I mean, you just all around the world. There's not a single place where Islam is touching another non-Islamic society where there isn't violence. And that should tell us something about that religion. I am Luke Moon. I am the executive director of the Philos Project. I'm a pastor sometimes, but I'm very active in the intersection of faith and politics in all over the United States, but here in New York as well.
So I want to ask about the religious aspects of this campaign in New York City. This would be the first time that the city has elected a Muslim mayor. How significant is that?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that would be pretty significant. I mean, it's, the religious observance of, the mayors of New York has probably, it's not like they're probably very strongly faithful, but nonetheless, it'll be the first time for a Muslim. And we've seen other places in the world, particularly in the Western world, when a Muslim comes into significant office, it does significantly change the makeup from then on.
So if you look at a place like London, where we have a Muslim mayor, is that something you're concerned about? Do you see that as a kind of a warning sign for New York? You don't want to go down this path?
I do. I mean, I think it's been bad in other places in the world, and looking at how it's affected London, I think I'm concerned about how it might affect us here in New York.
And what things specifically are you worried about in terms of his religious perspective?
Well, there's kind of this like good cop, bad cop setup, I feel, in which Mamani, like his policies, if you look at him, I mean, what is he advocating for? I mean, he wants, he's pledged $100 million support illegal immigrants, but that was not the ones, that doesn't necessarily, focus on kind of the moral issues. But he was pressed this last week on decriminalizing prostitution. He wants to support gender reassignment surgery type stuff, which is kind of way outside of, I think, what typically Muslims would affirm. I mean, he seems to be much more aligned with his kind of socialist ideals as opposed to the Islamist ones. But nonetheless, what it does is provide, he's the good cop to the bad cop Islamist world, right? So, he can say, yeah, I'm Muslim, I'm not like those Muslims, but, I'm Muslim. So it provides the fertile ground for increased Muslim activity in New York.
And the thing about Islam, obviously, that can be quite controversial is that it's not just a religion like Christianity, it's like a whole embracing philosophy and governs your whole life, or does for most people who believe in Islam.
Right.
So there's a bit of a difference, I suppose, when you get a Muslim politician, because the faith is so important, not just for the faith, but also for everything in their life, how it governs everything.
Right. Within Islam, there's no inherent separation of powers. Actually, within Christianity, there is a separation of powers. Now, the degree to which that separation is extended is up for debate, but there certainly is. Within, you have a verse where, Jesus is asked about paying taxes. He says, render unto Caesar that which is Caesar's, render unto God that which is God's. So understand there was a difference between the role of the state and the role of the church. And I think that, is historic within the United States, but with that, there's nothing like that within Islam. Actually, Islam is much more of a political religious institution than what you find in Christianity.
And when it comes to his views on Israel and Palestine, perhaps his religion comes into this as well. Obviously, he said some fairly controversial things about Israel in particular. I know this is a topic you're interested in. For example, he's refused to condemn this phrase, globalize the intifada. What do you make of his Israel-Palestine politics and how his faith comes into that?
Well, it's not just globalize the intifada, which is, and the intifada was in a reference to two intifadas in Israel. Both were trying to throw off the shackles of Israel, right? Like the first one in the 80s, the second in the 2000s, and the first one was actually not particularly violent. I mean, it had violent elements within it, but the second intifada, which is the one that most people, particularly in Mamdani's age group, will remember, was a proper violent intifada. It was the reason why the separation barrier was created, was because suicide bombers were getting on buses. There was actually the kind of the impetus for the separation barrier in Israel was an Islamist got on a bus full of kids going to kindergarten, and just as the bus pulled up in front of the school, that's when he detonated his belt and blew up a bunch of kids. That was it. Israel was like, we're done with this, people. And to globalize Intifada is to globalize the Islamist expansion, the Islamist, and in the violent way. It was a violent overthrow of Israel, an attempted violent overthrow of Israel. It failed, obviously, but nonetheless, that language is there. But he doesn't stop there. He wants to undo the definition of anti-Semitism, which is based off what is called the IRA definition, the International Holocaust Remembrance Association definition of anti-Semitism, which I swear is the most generous, basic definition of anti-Semitism. It basically says, like singling out Jewish people is anti-Semitism, and it's a very easy definition, but it's too right wing for guys like Mamdani, and he has publicly said he wants to do away with it.
So are you concerned about his kind of mixture of socialist politics, but also the Islamism or Islam as a kind of, I don't know, a blue-green coalition?
Yeah, well, I call it the Red-Green Alliance, because, but there's been some good work that shows like actually the socialist and Islamist kind of ideals find a lot of foothold together, right? Actually, I'll start from a biblical sense or a spiritual sense. Like both of them are resistant to the Bible. I mean, see the Bible and those who affirm the Bible as being in the way of the progress that they're after. A lot of people don't know this, but Karl Marx was asked, who in England is your biggest obstacle? It was Charles Spurgeon. Charles Spurgeon, why? Because Charles Spurgeon was preaching, that was an evangelist and doing a revival among the working class in the UK, and that undermined the power and the place where Karl Marx had the most traction. And he said that his biggest enemy in the UK was a Christian pastor who was evangelizing the working class. And you see there the resistance, the biggest resistance to the socialist ideals is the people who are from the Bible, and the biggest resistance to those who are opposed to the Islamist ideal are Christians and people who are from the Bible.
In some other American cities, we've seen Islam and Islamist politics kind of encroaching on local American politics. Obviously, the most famous example is Dearborn, Hamtramck, where you've got a Muslim mayor in Hamtramck, a Muslim majority city council, actually just completely Muslim city council. And some of the things that they've done have been quite controversial. Are you worried that with Mamdani becoming mayor of New York, maybe we'll see more of this kind of politics in America's most important financial and city, I guess, in the whole country?
Yeah, no, I think it validates Islam in the United States in a way that I don't think it should be. I just I don't I I'm opposed to the Islamism's influence on America, and I think it should be resisted.
We're going to be speaking, or I have spoken with some Jews who are worried about Mamdani, but there are also some Jews who support Mamdani, including in his own campaign, and a lot of Jews voted for him in the primary election. These are kind of liberal Jews. But with you, I want to ask about the Christians, though, in New York. So people think of New York City as being a very liberal, probably secular city, obviously very, very heavily Democrat, very few Republicans in the city. Can you tell us a bit about the Christian population of New York City and how they're reacting to Mamdani?
Yeah, I think that what you're going to find in the people who are most resistant to Mamdani, this actually happened. You saw this in the original kind of the primary, was the people who are making less than $100,000 a year were the ones that were more supportive of Cuomo, and you see those are the same people actually you will find in a church like this. The kind of the key churches in New York tend to be actually ethnically homogenous, meaning like this is a Spanish-speaking church, and you'll find a Hmong church, and you'll find a Nigerian church, and like the churches tend to actually be where these communities, they'll live disparate from each other, all over Queens or the Bronx or Brooklyn or whatever, but the church community is where they kind of find, cultural homogeneity, right? And so it's in those places where those churches are also, a lot of people are coming from places where socialism has destroyed their nations, and they see the problem of it, and they don't like it, and they don't like they're opposed to even the kind of moral and ethical things that Mamdani is promoting, because it's, like I said, the advocating for the mutilation of minors who want to cut off their genitals in the name of a trans ideology, the legalization or decriminalization of prostitution. It never works anywhere. And it always is destructive, and it's destructive to humanity, and it will cost the city the moral fiber of the city even further. But it's not surprising to me that progressive people who don't believe in God are supporting Mamdani. That I expect.
Is there any other Christian angles to Mamdani that I've missed out? I mean, is there anything else you wanted to say from a Christian perspective?
Well, I just think it's it's not surprising to me, again, like I said, that red-green alliance, the Marxists and Islamists coming together. That's what we saw on the college campuses, but it tends to be what happens in that movement is, strangely enough, the Islamism becomes dominant, right? You have, like, how strange it is that you suddenly have socialists who are wearing hijabs, or they're at Columbia University when there was the encampment. You have the Islamists would have these prayer times, and you would have these socialist kids who are joining in on that, and it's because the socialist ideal is actually fairly weak. It lacks some kind of transcendence, and what the Islamists provide is that transcendence that a lot of these people are after. The problem is it tends to lead to violent outcomes. I mean, there's the bloody borders of Islam around the world. Everywhere Islam touches a non-Islamic civilization of any kind, there's violence. I mean, it's in Malaysia and Thailand, in India and Pakistan, in Bangladesh, in all across this strip, all across Africa, sub-Saharan Africa. You can keep going. You go to the Philippines. I mean, like everywhere, Russia and Chechnya. I mean, you just all around the world. There's not a single place where Islam is touching another non-Islamic society where there isn't violence. And that should tell us something about that religion.
So, as you say, people see him as kind of the good cop because he's so supportive of trans rights and things that are quite secular or progressive, and most conservative Muslims would think this is mad. So you would still warn people against Mamdani that maybe this, as you say, like this could open up something
Not
more
could,
dangerous.
will. It will. It's not a could. It's like, again, he's the good cop. He's the nice, easygoing, very good at social media, great on camera, knows when to smile, does all the right stuff, and says all the right things, and says the things that these people want to hear. But behind him comes a 1,400 years of violent expansion.
Since Charlie Kirk was assassinated, what has been the reaction in America amongst the younger generations?
They're going to church. I mean, it is I just saw yesterday that pastors are reporting a 15 to 20% increase in the number of people coming to church. And reports are also coming in that like 10 million more Bibles have been sold year on year. At my church, the Friday, the like youth group service, the Friday after the death of Charlie, 200 kids showed up. A bunch of those had never been before. I think it's there seems to have sparked a revival. It seems in America, and there was like an evangelistic event at University of Tennessee in Knoxville this last weekend. 6,000 students came to that. There was the Pitts at Pitt. There was another evangelistic crusade. That one was led by the football players. They saw tons of people come to faith at that one. I was talking with a guy yesterday who said that in high schools in the Seattle area, there's a guy who is literally going into high schools, like public high schools in the Seattle area. He's been to 30 high schools, and he's doing straight up evangelism in these high schools. That is, to me, unheard of. I have not seen that. I grew up in Seattle. Seattle's not a place where you're like, oh, there's a bunch of Christians. There's not. It's one of the least Christian parts of America, and yet there's properly a hunger out there for Jesus.
Do you see Charlie as a kind of martyr figure?
I do. I think that, and in the best way. I mean, he modeled very much what I think a lot of people were hungry for. I mean, I would say, it's very interesting. I was with a guy just after the memorial service. I was in Phoenix for memorial service, and I was hanging out with a guy, and he said, that the Charlie he met in 2019 was more libertarian, didn't see this, deep sense of connection to faith. It was kind of very much, we can't bring faith into this conversation. And over the course of, I don't know whether it was COVID, whether it was getting married to Erica, there was clearly a transformation that had taken place between 2019 and 2025 in how even Charlie saw his role. He began to test out that. And if you had asked me, years ago when I was, I had not been to the Turning Point USA America Fest, which in Phoenix, just around Christmas every year. And the first time I went, I was of the mind that TPUSA was libertarian. They didn't have any room, God was not anywhere. And I was shocked at how just about every person who spoke from the stage, talked about their faith and talked about their family. And then they had a worship night. And I was like, wait, what I thought this organization was about was not at all what it is. And so to me, what Charlie was modeling out there was discourse, the using ideas to challenge the status quo of the ideas, going into the universities to make the case. And the other thing that people say about him was, like, it wasn't a show. It was real. Like, that was who Charlie was. And he lived that. Like, what he said in private was what he said in public. And that level of authenticity, what I hear from Gen Z is what they're hungry for, is like what makes them take somebody seriously is if that person is authentic. And I think Charlie was, and I think people saw that in Charlie. I think Charlie was certainly a martyr.
Do you feel that those who liked Charlie, I mean, I've spoken to lots of Americans who were just so emotional about his death in a way like a family member had died, like someone who'd really close, and they'd never met him, they'd just seen him on, they'd almost like grown up with him, seeing his clips on YouTube and whatever. Why do you think the reaction has been so visceral amongst many? I'm not going to say everyone, because we'll get on to the other side in a minute, but why do you think this caused such an emotional reaction for so many millions of Americans?
I mean, it was emotional for me. My nephew was killed earlier this year, and I was, obviously very emotional for the death of my nephew. I would say, like, this was almost to that level, and I had met Charlie, about 6 weeks before he was killed, but I had not met him or spent time with him, but I had been to his conferences. I knew who he was. I knew his influence. I knew he understood Gen Z in a way that very few did. And I think what the reason that he had such a impact was how, like, unjust it was. It's like the fact that here's this guy, his whole thing is just taking questions. Like, let's argue it out. And the injustice of him being killed as he was doing that, to me, was, I think it just hit people as like, come on. Like, this is not somebody who's just out throwing mud all the time and just kind of like a jerk. No, this is like a good guy who gets taken out like this. It just, like, I think it was different than, different than like any other politician. Maybe like, Trump or some senior, a cabinet member might be, at that level. But as a non-politician who really kind of was doing like the ideal of American kind of life, I think the injustice of it probably made a big impact, I think.
Now, the reaction hasn't been so wholesome amongst many people in America. We saw after his death, or after his killing, I should say, many people celebrating online, thousands and thousands of people, grinning, smiling, laughing. They saw him as an evil conservative. How did that make you feel? What did you make of that reaction?
Well, I was, the people I was talking to on Wednesday evening, after it had been announced that Charlie was dead, I was like, I'm really afraid for America at this moment, because the emotion I was feeling towards those people was not a wholesome emotion, right? It was like there was a certain amount of rage at the people who were celebrating. And, as the days progressed and we didn't see kind of the throwing bullets kind of that I kind of almost expected, I was like, okay, we dodged a bullet there, in a way, because I thought we were going to turn on each other in a significant way as a result, and the fact that we didn't still surprises me a bit, actually.
I suppose it does show you, though, that millions of Americans don't have the same moral values as perhaps you and other Christians have. I mean, to celebrate the murder even of your political enemy, I suspect, would that have happened when America was a more Christian society? I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think I don't know that, somebody at that level kind of on the other side, I'm not sure that there's a lot of people on the conservative side that don't necessarily, would be kind of also unkind should it have been somebody on the left that got some kind of treatment like that as well. So I don't put it past either side for having those elements within it. I think what we didn't see, though, so it was, not to say we're the same, is we didn't see the riots. We didn't see cities burned down. We didn't see cities boarded up. There wasn't a call to the streets to take matters, none of that happened. And I think so. I don't think that the Republicans and Democrats or the progressives and conservatives are equal on this. I think we have shown once again that actually we are not like them.
Are you worried about the rise of left-wing political violence?
Yeah, I am. I mean, I think it's going to continue. I think there's the left hasn't changed its rhetoric. We'll see how this designation of Antifa as a domestic terrorist organization, how that plays out. Part of it is that there isn't really an infrastructure, like the laws aren't clear within the federal laws are not clear on how to deal with that kind of stuff because there's not really enough law. And so they have to go after the finances, and it'll be a bit like taking down Al Capone, he was the way they took him down was for, tax fraud. It's going to be in that direction for sure, I suspect. But, the nihilism that the left is offering doesn't have a real outlet. And the psychological breaking that seems to take place, chemically induced, within it's strange that so many are in some kind of transitioning, which means they're chemically altering themselves, and the psychosis that seems to be coming from that. It's tapping into a person typically that already has some narcissistic tendencies, and add to that strange disrupting chemicals in their bodies. We're not done seeing the outcome of that yet. So
let's get into some of the arguments that's happened since Charlie's death on the right, and there hasn't been this unified response.
Tell me about it.
Yeah. So on the one side, you've got Candace Owens and others who are trying to argue, or she also was trying to argue that Charlie was a Catholic or was going towards Catholicism, praying with the rosary and stuff. Maybe you can talk about that to begin with. But also saying that maybe the reason that he was killed was because he was becoming more skeptical of Israel. That's certainly been heavily hinted.
Right. So I don't think he was in the process of becoming Catholic. I mean, he did, like me, have a great affinity for the Catholic Church and a lot of the Catholic. I'm friends with a ton of Catholic, and in the intersection of faith and politics, the Catholics are very strong and very helpful on a lot of issues. But I don't think being on the same page on kind of political issues, particularly at that intersection of faith and politics, that then transcends to accepting of Catholic doctrine and things like that. I think even within a couple months of his death, he said he was not on that path. So I don't think that was there. I also don't think that Charlie was antagonistic towards Israel in general. Okay, Charlie did not like Bibi. That I know. I think Bibi has a unique role, and I think actually any prime minister of Israel, but Bibi in particular, has the ability to speak to the American population differently than any other world. There's no other world leader that has the ability to get past the political minders of American policy and speak to the American population. Bibi has that ability. The Prime Minister of Israel has that. And I think that drives a lot of people crazy. I mean, that's what Obama didn't like and Biden didn't like him. And I think, like other political leaders have really struggled with the ability of the Israeli Prime Minister to do that. So Charlie did not like Bibi, but I don't think his support for Israel was rooted in whether or not he liked the current government makeup of Israel, and neither is mine. Like, I don't support Israel because of Bibi Netanyahu or the current political makeup of the Knesset. I support Israel because I think it's, as Christians, we're told to, and because Jesus was Jewish, and the promises of God seem to focus on one place in this world, and it happens to be Jerusalem.
Yeah, so there's some people who are trying to say that he was certainly becoming more skeptical towards Israel towards the end of his life. And I think that is true. I mean, if you look at some of his public statements, I'm sure you'd agree with that. And on the other side of things, you've got Netanyahu putting out this letter, putting out this couple of videos claiming Charlie as a kind of Israeli supporter, which obviously he was. But I think this has angered some Americans because they feel like, well, this was our guy, right, and he's American and America first. And you've got the Prime Minister of Israel making it almost about him and his country. And that, to me, that seemed a bit tone deaf. I don't know what you thought.
Oh yeah, no, when that kind of stuff comes out, I'm like, I really wish the Prime Minister's office had reached out and said, Luke, what do you think we should say, right? Because it was not that. I don't think, like I said, I don't think that Charlie was a particularly big fan of Bibi, but that didn't mean he didn't support Israel. I think that Israel has become such a difficult issue to manage. I mean, this is my job. I mean, I do this every day. And even, like, people are just so tired of talking about it. They don't like to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. And yet, they're, in a way, seemingly almost like forced to talk about it. And I think people are just like, enough already. Why do we got to keep talking about this? And I think there was, that kind of sense from Charlie was, this is a real problem, and this could have generational impact, because it's not just, I mean, there is such a deep rut in the history of Christianity of Jew hatred, of pogroms and killing of Jews, and blaming the Jews for every ill of society. I mean, if you were against Hollywood, the Jews own Hollywood. If you're against newspapers, Jews own newspapers. If you're against capitalism, the Jews own capitalism. If you're against communism, the Jews started communism. If you're against, like, you name it, somehow there's a Jew at the end of the line. That has led to a lot of violence against Jews. And I think that is a real problem. And so on one hand, you see that there's this there's this turning against Israel. On the other hand, any student of history knows where that leads. And so you're like, yeah, but okay, I get it. I get the impulse. I get the frustration. I don't like it either. We're trying to change things as we can, but this like it's a flood almost, that you're like, this is not good. This heads in a bad direction. I mean, like, it was a attack today in the UK on Jews standing in line for Yom Kippur. Like that's and there, the church being attacked this week. The synagogues have been hardened now for over a decade. Churches are now having to harden themselves. But it's always like that. First it's the Saturday people, and then the Sunday people. First they go after the Jews, and then the Christians are next. And that's I think the backdrop of where the concern is. It's like if there was no, listen, something happens in Costa Rica, nobody cares, right? But we're not spend years talking about Costa Rica. At some point, it's like, okay, I'm done with talking about Costa Rica. But we can't seem to get off of that train. And it just keeps it's like it's worse. And I'm like, I really need this war to end. So maybe can talk about it less and we get a little bit more sanity in the conversation. But I'm not even sure that's gonna do it.
Just finally, I want to talk about this Hamptons thing. And to those who don't know, there was this meeting with Charlie and some influencers in the Hamptons before he died, a few weeks before he died, and you were there.
I was.
And there's been some controversy around this meeting, sort of different ideas flying around about what happened. Can you just talk about what happened and maybe correct some of the misinformation or whatever?
Yeah, I got invited, and not as I was. So it was Charlie and Bill Ackman came together and said we should gather people together, influencers. Initially, it was largely about this Israel issue, but the more like Charlie and Bill talked about it, the more it became evident what Charlie was actually after was, creating mini Charlies. He knew he had this upcoming school year. He was going to hit a bunch of campuses, and he saw the need to expand the people who could go and speak the way he spoke. And so what started off initially as this conversation was going to be about Israel, it became a conversation on a host of issues so that Charlie could try and identify who could speak like him. And so the initial conversation was about what is an American. We did end up talking of Israel was one topic, the economy was a topic, but what has not made the news was the most controversial topic at this event was not Israel. It was marriage. And because Charlie was a big advocate for getting married young and having children. And there was a bunch of people in that room that didn't want to do that. And so that created, that was probably the most intense of all the conversations. But it was not what, a lot of people are saying it was. It was much more normal, like what you would want to see if you were out trying to recruit and identify. I mean, there were good influencers in that room that had big followings that could, speak to and pick up the mantle of Charlie. And it was, I was honored to be there.
Okay, Luke Moon, thank you so much for joining us.
Of course, it's my pleasure.